I'm Lana Heckman Ayers, the managing editor of MoonPath Press, and I'd like to welcome you to the book release reading for Joanne M. Clarkson and Risa Denenberg. This is a very special reading because these are two women whose passion to care for others with their presence in their chosen professions and through their poetry is really the soul of who they are. Joanne M. Clarkson fell in love with poetry as a child, and it has been a lifelong relationship. She won her first poetry contest in the 5th grade with a rhyming poem about Mount Rainier. Clarkson holds master's degrees in English and library and information science. She was a teacher and librarian for many years, but after caring for her mother through a very long illness, she re-careered as a registered nurse, specializing in home health and hospice. Another lifelong avocation for Clarkson has been reading palms and tarot. She lives with her husband in Port Townsend, Washington, where the two are avid Argentine tango dancers. And this is a look at her beautiful book with her daughter's art on the cover. Risa Denenberg was born in Washington, D.C., and made her way to the Pacific Northwest in 2008, for which we're all very grateful. She's a family nurse practitioner who has worked in clinical nursing and education in the areas of abortion, HIV/AIDS, hospice, palliative care, chronic pain management, and family health. She's currently volunteering with the Squim Free Clinic and End of Life Washington. Denenberg is the founder of Headmistress Press, a publisher of lesbian, bi, and trans poetry. She curates the Poetry Cafe for chapbooks and is a review editor at Rivermouth Review. She lives with her cats, Bo and Tig, on the Olympic Peninsula, where on a clear day, she can see Mount Baker. And this is a rainy day, her book, Rain Dweller, with its beautiful cover. Before I turn things over to Risa and Joanne, I'd like to ask that you keep yourself muted during the reading. Afterward, we'll have an opportunity for comments and questions. Joanne, Risa, please share your poems with us.
Oh, so well. Thank you all for coming. This is a little overwhelming.
Very exciting, yes. Thank you.
I just want to set the reading up for you. First of all, it was so fortuitous that the two of us are reading together. We're paired because our pub dates were similar, but we have so much in common. We both, as Lana said, we both live on the Olympic Peninsula. I'm here in Port Townsend with Joanne. And we just felt like we had so much in common that we wanted to have our poems talk to each other, or have some of the poems in dialogue. So we've come up with a sort of mixtape, and we're going to do sets. And at the beginning of each set, we're going to share a poem with each other. And then we'll each read alternatingly, so that there's some more time for each of us to read individually. So, and the thing about Joanne's work that I love so much is her lyricism, and the fact that her lyricism is in service to narrative, something I really appreciate.
And I too I've known for years who Risa was, but I'd never actually met her. And I've been so thrilled, and I'm sure, having spent a lot of time now with Rain Dweller in order to arrange for this reading, and because she sent me a copy, I feel that what really touched my heart was Risa's vulnerability. And I think I'm a better poet for having read her book, and I'm encouraged to maybe open myself a little bit more. So thank you, Risa.
Wow, thank you. So our first set is going to start with a coincidence that we've both had a dead sister.
Oh.
You're going to read first.
I am going to read first, and I'm going to start with my poem, Recurrent Dream of Kathleen. You call from the city of your passing, the city of our birth, with news of common souls, sending gifts I never dare to open. My hand-me-down sister who lived for only a month, just enough time to make a woman. favoring a mother, the way I wear our father's jeans. You perch beside her on the piano bench, your light touch arched over her emotions. I would not be honest without confessing jealousy. Your death holds so much guilt, you must be canonized in porcelain, your future always flawless. My moon in Gemini, my changeable moon. When I was a child, I heard you crying in the night, then silence, our mother never waking. Now that I have lived beyond all lost footsteps, I still wake to the grief of an imagined life.
It's beautiful. So my poem is called Still Life with Dead Sister. Wow, okay, I'll read mine. Still Life with Dead Sister. The sister I never had drops by at odd hours, brings me gifts. She wears a floppy green garden hat and brings bouquets of mums and poppies. The mums are yellow, the poppies orange. She asks, why live alone? She puts the flowers in a vase. I say, I like being alone. She was stillborn before I was born and haunts my solitude. The sister I never had haunts my solitude, wearing a floppy green garden. She brings tomatoes and cucumbers, drops them onto the table with the flowers, lays down her hat alongside them. The sister I never had slices tomatoes, sprinkles salt, and feeds me tomato sandwiches. She makes tomato sandwiches on plain white bread with mayonnaise. She spreads the mayo thick. She sprinkles salt on the tomatoes. She sprinkles salt over her left shoulder. She mimics our grandmother. Poi, 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 she says. She chastens me, tells me to forget her, get on with my life. Every time she comes, she tells me I should not live alone. She leaves her floppy green hat on the table.
Beautiful.
So that's our first set, and Joanne's going to read now.
Okay, and I'm going to read 3 poems. It's hard to know which ones to pick, always. I'm going to start with a poem. I guess a lot of my poems in my book, as those of you that have already read it know, have to do with patients that I cared for. And there are so many ways of dying. This poem is really special. For one thing, it was published in the American Journal of Nursing, something I thought would never happen to me. I read that publication for 20 years, and I'd always read that one section where people had a poem, and I always thought, wouldn't that be cool? But of course, one reason they never published them is because I never submitted them. But when I did, they published this poem, and it was, anyway, I'll just read it. I promised not to tell her he is dying. So much emotion in these rooms, walls are weeping. Some call it steam from soup on the stove. One son in rain gear goes out to check the roof. The man in the narrow bed knows he is dying. We lock eyes as I coil my stethoscope back into my nursing bag. In his gaze, I sense a plea. His wife, also 85, still gets up at 6 a.m. to pack his lunch, although she forgets mid-kitchen what bread is for. He has made one request, not for freedom from pain or a quick end to breathlessness. He has asked the same pact of his three living children and all the grands and greats. Don't tell her. She won't remember in an hour or a minute. The thread of death will come over and over. Terror and grief for both loss of life and a mind. Deep inside, she senses something wrong. She worries her son has lost his job again, or that she has neglected one of so many birthdays. As soon as next week, one of the daughters will have to tell her of his passing. Even this her fragmented brain won't quite process, assuming instead he won't be home from work till late, or he must be just down at the store, or most likely patching the roof with all this rain running down her children's faces, slick on her own cheeks. Rain, the new name, since she has forgotten what tears are for. Kind of an emotional poem. I do have a box of Kleenex. Okay.
You need one?
No, I'm good for now. Okay. A lot of my poems too, I feel like are tributes to people because it takes a lot of courage to die and die well. This person was not a hospice patient, but someone that we knew in our family. It's called 20 Minutes in Memory of TD. Signs posted down by the docks warn of the cold current. More than 20 minutes swimming can be fatal, they say. This sea knows life's narrow gauge, the planet's caliber. Travis is famous for diving overboard after his fellow crabber washed away in winter seas. He saved him, treading water for them both for 22 minutes until the crew hauled them in. Brave is what we do beyond the body. In summer, they worked fire lines together, back to back, remembering the opposite burn. There are those who test the edges, jumping just in time as the flaming limb falls. Time, the lesser measure of what we call on to survive. Thank you, Travis, for being in our lives. The last poem I'm going to read, could you pass me a Kleenex after all? Huh.
That's the last one.
I'll have to share it. You could get us more. The last poem in this set is a poem from my mother, how I was kind of called to be a hospice nurse and how my life changed one morning at her deathbed. I think so many of us have had truly, truly deeply profound moments at the bedside of a loved one. This is called Vigil. All of them were there outside the window. Grandmother, lost daughter, the farmhouse neighbor, weather of darkness and shine, all her longing and regret in a single final breath. The miracle was that I saw them too, not features, but form, recognition born of the slope of a shoulder, the cant of a hand, horizon of shadow like a familiar Olympic range, or the magnified edge of a tattered wing. Yes, I knew them all by flesh or legend. And as her body fell still, I heard in my head the voices asking if I, the newly orphaned daughter, wanted to cross over too, as if through softened glass into some boundaryless love. Did I? Did my reciprocal love pass through even for an instant? But I am mother, wife, and neighbor, and must fulfill my years, gathering the shadows that will guide me through the glass.
So that was lovely.
Thank
That was
you.
very lovely. We're going on to set 2, and we're reading poems that have to do with the animals, the wildlife. I mean, the thing in common is the wildlife that we both enjoy so much out here on the peninsula. I'll read mine first to give you a minute. This is Rain Dweller Learns the Names of Trees. I've learned to tell the fir from the yew, the silver from the red cedar. At sunrise, there is a thin glint of light northeastward where I await Mount Baker's frozen specter careening over Discovery Bay. The lamps of Port Townsend blink, strands of fog hang over the fields. Peckish deer nibble dandelions. I spare my lawn for their gaze, for their graze. The squirrels, miniature and rust-bellied, easily reach the hanging birdseed. I don't try to learn bird calls. They come to the feeder, and that's enough. There are rumors of big cats. I've seen 2 elk. One stared through me as if she knew my secrets, the other roadkill. You once told me my poems are too grim and I should try my hand at something more pastoral. I've seen powdered snow on cedars, and I've grown passably fond of rain. Every day the clouds amaze.
In my book, which is mostly about hospice patients, I did put some nature poems in too. I have to say, my wonderful poetry sister, Linda Streever, who is here today, this book wouldn't exist without Linda, because I kind of shied away from doing a volume of hospice poems. They were kind of personal and they were kind of sad. And I thought, who want to read a book about just dead people, even if they are inspiring? And Linda said, yeah, but it's what you love. It's what you love the most. And that's what we always write best about. But to just modify the just constant death person poems, I did stick in some nature poems. And this is one called Ragged Phantom. The Ragged Phantom. My dream is rattled by a minor key, note keener than sorrow when it strikes during sleep. A single howl and then a dozen echoing yips, like the black and white pup I first remember calling home. The flute, part throat, mostly bone. No one knows how to play except in loneliness. I am dreaming about the ruffians of this world, the scruff-necked wanderers lapping from the tin plate of the moon. I have seen a coyote in the wild only twice, both times at the crooks of loss. No pride of lion, no tribe of wolf, creature old and worn, born for a tune that makes even stars cover their ears. The sweet of strawberry betrayed by bitter onion. Whistle a mongrel might follow. Mirage of sound, older than the longest sleep. So now, poetry sister, it's your turn to read.
Okay. A lot of the poems in Rain Dweller actually are about trees, and so these are some of those sorts of poems. A few. The first one is How Two Trees Become a Forest, and it's after Arthur Z. A teacher draws Chinese characters on the chalkboard to show how 2 trees become a forest. Chalk is soft white limestone composed of the shells of foraminifers. A student looks up the Chinese character for shell. An Afghani schoolgirl covers her head and walks to the schoolhouse with broken windows. She tells her teacher she hopes to become a doctor. I bring soup to a neighbor who tells me she hopes to die soon. The girl on the radio sings, my body's in trouble. I wonder, will I die alone? A lonely boy pauses in front of a girl sketching a forest of firs and yews. Their branches barely move in the humid haze of noon. An infant grabs the wooden slats of her crib and pulls herself up to cry for her mother. I think how much is lost without these signs to guide us. Foraminifers are single-celled immobile. The foramen ovale is a hole in the heart that must close at birth. This is, so I have a set of selfie poems in the book. This is Selfie at Deception Pass. Deception Pass is also very local. It's a series of bridges over this really treacherous water. And it's a place, if you're out here, you've visited, and if you haven't, you probably should come out here to see it. It's beautiful bridge work. Selfie at Deception Pass. You can't say you didn't know you would drown here. There was no deception. The application clearly stated, rain dwellers only. You didn't come here planning to jump. You're not a planner. The bridge soars 180 feet above the Narrows. Click. Clutching at the safety mesh, buffeted by crosswinds, waters churning below. You pray an enormous cormorant will swoop down to bear you away. You only came here to flee the voices, to unwind amid the tall, reedy grasses that grow along ponds and stitch these brackish waterways. The regret that rises in your throat during the descent was predictable. Instead of flight, perhaps you should have rode. The hell that flung you here debarked with you. Like you, these are only obeying instinct, seeking Arctic shrubs, these geese flying north in winter. And this is, again, I climb. It's exactly a description of where I live. Again, I climb the crest of the last rise before the road twists its way downhill to the bay. She lifts into view, her frosted top floating as these Pacific Northwest top peaks do, a mirage above a shimmering cake stand. And without blush, I confess to her, my dear, dear Mount Baker. As well, I wave blessings to the moon when it delights me, emerging full from behind a cloud in a leaden sky to guide me home again. The me that only sings or cries alone in the car foresees the day I will not round this curve again, not drive again, not see mountaintops again, must leave my home for the sheltered hovels of the old. Fared to never see the moon rise again and again, and then to not see again. So we're going to go on to
Wow.
our third set.
Okay, I'll read first this time.
Okay. And these poems,
Yeah.
why did we come up with these?
Mine's kind of about the ocean. Are they about
They're
weather?
about the ocean. They're both
Okay,
about
yeah.
the ocean.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And this is an extended metaphor, I guess, about a very lovely lady. I always like hair, and that's always a big deal for me. And this lady that was, anyway, just read, Joanne. The beauty. Her hair was silver, not steel or nimbus, a polished heirloom, patina of leaves after rain. She admitted her lifelong vanity. My patient, she lived her last days by the ocean. I do not remember the names they gave the failure of her body, only her shining, its softness consoling the aging of her face. And I recall on that last morning, I combed at her request, stroke after stroke of river in rare sunlight. After long winter, luster where it entered the sea.
Water. I'm a water sign, are you?
No, I'm an air sign, I'm
Okay.
Aquarius.
just curious.
Water bearer.
This is how to write a poem at ocean's edge. I mouth unknowns because there are so many. I push west from Clallam Bay towards the Pacific, having left everything nowhere, where it rains, where it fills my pockets with stones, not shells. Stones spout long-winded homilies wrapped in short conjunctions of seaweed. Once submerged, words are hung to dry. Briny air offers the succinct phrases needed, rolling along until it delivers, vertex or breach. I float aimless and unable to swim. I can't, but I will. I always do. Gray sky drizzles as I slog along at low tide, stalking verse, listening as waves compose their capricious syntax. Joanne's going to read again, and then
Okay.
we'll have me read again after that.
I mean, in 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to read this poem because a number of people have said they especially liked it. It was one of the last ones I included in the book because I had struggled with it. It's a neat image and it was a great experience, but for some reason I had a lot of trouble putting it together, but I guess it works. And it's one of those poems, one of my teachers and mentors, Brian Willis, is also here today. And his advice for most poets is always after he read a poem, he said, 10 words, 10 words. That meant you got rid of 10 words, which made the poem much better, always more concise, which is good. But anyway, this poem is for a beloved patient, and it's called Foxglove. Each June, hillsides shiver with them. Wildflower no touch quite fits. A rose gauntlet for bee. Poison made into medicine for the faltering heart. Ultimately, we all die of heart failure. If you pick foxglove blossoms, bring them in, vase them, they wilt in less than a day, never meant to be tamed. I had a hospice patient once whose small house faced the ocean, beach accessed by wooden stairs collapsing into seagrass. In spring, a vixen birthed 4 kits beneath that wood. We watched young foxes chase and roll with tides, scattering broken shell. What is poison? The wrong dose? Nature tainted? Too much juice to force through human chambers? I wore ordinary gloves to bathe his weeping wounds. We lost ground daily as young things grew, roamed farther up the shoreline. Summer arrived with dusty blossoms, even the bees lazy. On that last morning, I walked out and picked them anyway, stalk after weary stalk, favors for a heart at rest, named for an animal hand.
I love that.
I do too. Now it's one of those, there's some poems you're never sure about, but one thing that informed my life and made me want to be a hospice nurse, some of you know that I started out in nursing right after high school, but because of things that had happened in my past, especially the death of my father and sister and grandfather, I emotionally couldn't handle it. And I've always been so, so grateful that later in my life, I did get to feel what I experienced, what I felt was my true calling. But I do have a couple of poems in here about my father's death when I was young. And this one is called Holyrood really is a cemetery in North Seattle. Many of you probably know. Holyrood, relic of the true cross. At the cemetery's entrance, bare wood crossed bare wood without a body. When I touched it in dreams, my hands woke up stinging the way after a day playing in the forest, my mother took a needle and gouged out splinters. I have no idea how she paid for that plot where we buried my father. His income had been simple, like the hammer on his headstone. She, who was just my mother, must have sold something, maybe something from her mother. My job was to find the public spigot and fill the metal cylinder that fit into his marker with water so cold that it wept inside out. In summer, we brought iris. In winter, evergreen, our skin stained with pitch, the scent of what we cut. Shivering there, a woman and her 10-year-old, We never prayed, listened instead to the tomb of wind called missing. She bent and with bare fingers brushed away grass clippings gently, the way she washed his body and my hands. And one more poem in this set is for my friend Mardella, who is also here. It was the very last poem I wrote for this collection. I felt I needed one more, and I walked up to the mailbox one day and saw my neighbor Mardella, who, as she wrote in the comment, had lost her husband not too long before. And it's the one that Lana put on the back of the book. It's called Phases of Mourning. You changed his sheets 1,000 times those final months. So tired, time became only phases of night. That he was grateful you took for granted, since slurred words ran like soup from the left side of his listless mouth. And then the dying, another term for absence. He took your stature, your talent, your humors, all colors of them. What does it take to awaken? Pain, certainly, but also the rejection of your own dance with death. You plant geraniums on the porch, then walk bareheaded to the mailbox. You change the sheets for your dreams only. You learn to live within them. Thank you, Mardella.
Wow. You know, we're approaching our last set. I just want to say about our work and how it speaks together is that your work, Joanne, deals with the intimacy of death of the person, and mine tends to deal with a more global, metaphorical death that's going on in the world. And I think that combination is really important. We're at our fourth cycle.
We are.
And it has to do with birth. Okay, good. Mine's called Intuition. As I entered my 8th month of pregnancy, my grandmother, time-worn and ripened, exited our line. Far from home, I received the news in a whoosh of air. As a warbler trilled a melody I suddenly understood. And though there was much to fear, the awareness settled in me like a deep stream. She companioned me for the lying in. A feral cat crept into the room and stayed during the long hours of my labor. She howled as my son crowned, cries louder than my own, then disappeared. And just before he emerged, I reached inside and felt black curls protecting his soft skull, his fontanelle. At that moment, I received her blessing and saw his face still curled in its confinement, and knew, as a mare knows, it was time to bear down.
That's such a beautiful poem.
Thank you.
I always felt really close to my grandmas too. God bless grandmothers. My poem is more about how death and birth are alike. Yeah. It's called Bedside. I watched the body give up its elastic grip, its hungers dwindling into sips of tepid water, the eyes so full of stories looking beyond me. How will I know death? I had asked. How will I tell for sure? It was like when I asked the midwife how I would know labor, and she laughed. You will know, you will know. But it wasn't as simple as that for me. The body struggling to free itself, and now the soul. The chest rises and stills for a beat, 2, 3, then suddenly inflates rising from a deep lake into lamplight. Yet when it came, I did know. Some bodies look young again, someone had told me, others as old as time can imagine. All the air in the room had gone. The world lay naked to ions of traveling starlight. Even skin breathes, I had never realized until now. No blood, just pale. The final push as effortful as birth. The letting go of flesh, life, never wholly mine. Pain and what to name it. I did wonder at the end about death, death itself. If I was dying, I put my hand to my chest and felt the heaviness of loss and the weight of a newborn.
Death and birth. They were in both poems, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a little bit from Posthuman, which was published as a chapbook a couple years ago by Floating Bridge Press and is included in this volume. And I'm going to read, it's a sonnet cycle, and I'm going to read the first two and the last two. The epigraph is from Job, the book of Job. But ask the animals, and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, or let the fish in the sea inform you. It was a warm day in April when the coleus died. On the porch, the spider plant bowed its swords in supplication, scorched by nearby fires. Parched, the wandering Jew wandered no more. Drought defiant, the jade and snake plants endured spring, then died in summer's swelter. The house of wood quit its joists and stages of rot, and lost kin of wolves, a long-eared mutt, died inside after lapping the last scraps from his bowl with a mane of dejection. In the yard, flies laid eggs and decaying remains. In due time, maggots arose to cleanse putrid flesh. And though the land lay fallow, ants kept on heaving 100 times their weight to sandy anthills. The bees were pleased that no one stole their combs. When humans perish, honey will flow and bees will grow fat and rejoice. Irises too, when they open to dew and no boot tramples their wakening. Pink stripes broadcast the dawn, frogs fall silent, chords of birdsong rise. The new garden is post-human, a term I learned from my grandson. We mourn the loss of Mother Earth, but bewail our own deaths more. Mud will sprout limbs as unnamed flora and fauna emerge. Until then, we'll fill the bird feeder. We deplore human rubbish as if we're not the root of the problem. We're nearly submerged in waste, waylaid by pipe dreams of time without end, wearing brand new sneakers, t-shirts, and sweats. Everything I know of love, I've learned from pets. And these are the last two of the sequence. Mother has lost her lackluster, Mother has lost patience with lackluster compassion. Birds starve while oceans rise. My grandsons are now old enough to make their own babies. And Greta Thunberg will turn 100 in 2103. She cares about a future beyond 2030. Tells us that survival after our departure is our nightmare, but is her reality. We stand by as Florida slips into the sea. No more Vietnam or Mumbai. It's too easy to look away, say nothing, cover our eyes with stones and lie voiceless under cold earth, scatter our ashes in landfill. Everything needs to change, Greta says. She's right, everything needs to change. Everything is changing now. Mama's in the kitchen warming up human cargo to serve as leftovers. I dream of trees tapping out new codes with their roots. We stay the course as if Kismet is right over there on that other shore near the ruins. I turn to you for succor, but you've disappeared. We're a couple of old trees, separated by loam, losing our lineage. Beneath bark, youth alter and acclimate. There will be no further warnings. We must learn to stop praying for ourselves. High winds ravage dwellings, wildfires jump canyons, boatloads of refugees drown as seas take back the land. Face it, it's not our world anymore. And this is a poem called Cul-de-sac. It actually happened sort of like it reads narratively at my home, which is on a cul-de-sac. 1. The doe slept on my lawn again this morning, having shooed her spotted twins to glean their own pastures. I studied my unshorn yard, my habitat, the dewy grass, having shooed my own featherless from the nest long ago. Seemed a quiet morning. Fog rolling in across the bay. Tomato plants showing off yellow buds. Sunny sides for breakfast. Chickens cackling in their pen. My toast dry, my coffee black. Someday I will mow this rowdy yard, coax my neighbors to speak to me again. Change rustles the page for a moment, a blustery warning. I stopped by to check on him, my usual, bearing eggs, the one I call uncle on this friendless cul-de-sac. 2. By the time they carried his body to the curb with flashing lights, neighbors had begun to gather in the street, shoeless, tank tops, bathrobes. A dog licked my shin. A girl I'd never seen rambled on about how he owed her something. I gave my name to the cop. I told the story start to finish. I checked for pulse, for breaths, my lips on his. I counted 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 30. They turned off the flashers, pulled the sheets. Apologize, that was my phone ringing. I'm reading this poem as the last of the set. It's called Enough Beauty in This World. Someone on Twitter asks us to recall the most beautiful place we'd ever seen. I said Earth, because I've never been to another planet. I'm exhausted and dirty and abandoned, and I still said Earth. Floating at the helm of my lonely seabed, I survey the damage, the centuries of neglect, and whisper Earth. Married to sheepskin, to the elk herd, to Sundays with only the radio for company, I vow to love my only mother. I've been handed moments, small and large. I've wandered many places, and each one stunning. Miami, Kabul, Dubrovnik, Seattle. I've traveled by plane, by ferry, on the jet stream. I've trekked barefoot in ballet flats. I've walked for days in the desert with only a blanket for water. All of this, just to remind myself I live here. And still, I say Earth.
Wow. Wow.
That was lovely.
It was lovely. That was totally lovely. So are we going to read one more? What are we going to do? Lana, what do you think?
Would you like to read one more each? Now we have about, on our recording time, we have about, I don't know, 11, more than 10 minutes left of recording time. Would you like to read one now, or would you like to read one after some comments and questions before we close?
Let's each read one more and then we can just chat with folk, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, go right ahead.
So while you're choosing, I'm going to read this one. Mean distance from the sun, Northern Hemisphere, midwinter. I lie fallow in my 8th decade, 91 million miles from an imploding fireball, beheld as light that raced 8 minutes to reach my eyes and has mercifully allowed me the miracle of another breakfast. 2 shiny eggs smothered in salsa, atop a tortilla, pined for in preparation, fleeting as an orgasm. I sit at a table 3,000 miles from the Florida coast, a knife, a fork grasped firmly in 2 hands, and cut myself into pieces small enough for a child to swallow. Nothing is simple, not our distance from the sun, nor my distance from my son.
Wow. You need a Kleenex?
No,
Okay.
I'm not a crier.
I am.
I am too.
I'm going to end with the last poem in my book because I think this is kind of the way death happens. And it's called The Art of Dying, and it's from my beloved Jess. Your son doesn't believe you when you claim everything repeats and you know outcomes of novels and ball games. You see him mouth dementia when you can't see, but you've read his lips through years through cataracts. It isn't what you've forgotten that disturbs. It's all you remember, moments folded and refolded until every word bleeds through. One day of 101 years is nothing compared to the pulse of an hour. Medical personnel keep lotteries on your passing, disease testifying against you. Only you realize that death doesn't count, but inscribes infinity. Suffering skating into twin ovals of joy. Life, the ceremony of reflective water over a shining stone. Blush of spectrums emerging from blue. Your comfort, symphony, sweet symmetries fitting the opening soul. This ache, mislabeled angina. You know Beethoven beyond tide or daylight. Art is never true until the perfect repetition. You assure me love will be easier soon. I will find you with every breath already, next to me now, then suddenly within. Thank you. Well, thank you, Risa, for reading with me, and thank you for Lana for publishing our books and arranging this reading. And then I really so much appreciate the audience, all of you coming to hear us. It means a lot.
It does. It means quite a lot. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Risa and Joanne, for that powerful, beautiful, and beautifully coordinated reading. I mean, it's the most beautifully coordinated and companionable reading I've ever experienced. So thank you so much for creating that for us. And I want to let the audience know once again, these 2 beautiful collections. The best place to get them are from the poets themselves. If you don't have their contact information, maybe we can add that to the chat again. And of course, our books are available through your independent booksellers. You just need to go in and order them, and they're available from IndieBound, bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com, Amazon. And I just want to tell you how grateful I am to not only to these readers for their beautiful poems, their beautiful souls, their beautiful presentation, but to all of you for being here as audience. As a poet myself, I always feel a poem is not complete until it has a reader or a listener. And that's where you come in. And thank you for the generosity of your listening and for being here. audience members, I'd like to invite you now, if you'd like to comment or ask questions, unmute yourselves and whatever you'd like to say, that would be wonderful. I think our poets are up for a question or two if you have one.
Sure.
So
So,
everybody ask at once.
yeah, so feel free.
Well, everybody is muted.
Yes, don't forget to unmute if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question. And if not, I have a question. No, it looks like Deborah wants to. Deborah, please, feel free.
I just wanted to say that many of these poems would rest quite well in music, not only because of the stirring images, but the flow of it. And I appreciated all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah,
I have a question for Risa. You seem to have changed with the place. Has moving to Squim changed you, and it seems to have changed your poetry?
Absolutely. I mean, I moved to Seattle and I lived in Tacoma where I knew you and where we spent time together in a writing group. And then I moved out to the Olympic Peninsula. But all the while, coming from the East Coast, starting in 2008 and these several moves, at one day, I just had to look at what I was writing and say, you know what, Risa, you've become a Pacific Northwest poet.
all right.
And it surprised me because I thought you had to be born out here to fit into that category. And I also think some of my concerns have changed over time
Yeah.
as I get older.
Oh, yeah.
As some of us here well know. If you don't do it now, say what you need to say now, you may miss your chance. But I do love it out here. I just really am very happy and feel at home here, particularly out here in this gorgeous natural environment. Thanks
Well,
for
you
that,
have
Glenna.
such depth, and earthiness, and it's wonderful to hear your poetry.
Thank you.
I enjoyed yours too, Joanne.
Thank you. Who's talking?
It's Glenna.
Oh, hi, Glenna. Yeah. I think I heard you once read in Tacoma at South Sound Poetry Connection a couple of years ago.
Probably did.
Glenna's book was a finalist for the Washington State Prize.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll ask or make a quick comment if that's okay. When my husband was ill, and as he was for a very long time, the last 6 months he was on hospice, and I so appreciated what all those saintly people did. I just couldn't imagine doing the job that they did. I am forever grateful. So I love hearing from your side of it, Joanne, how that felt from your perspective. That was very insightful and beautifully done. So thank you.
I felt so honored to be part of the lives of so many people that were so brave, the dying people and certainly their families. It's not easy to be a caregiver.
No, it isn't for all kinds, not only the emotional, which of course is huge, but physically, I found it difficult physically to, toward the end, manage the bathing, the cleaning, all of those things, just taking care of a big man, even though he lost so much weight as he grew sicker and sicker. But I appreciate your comments about that. Thank you very much.
Bless your heart.
Thank you.
Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, I'll close us off for the day. I want to thank you once again to our wonderful readers and thank you to our audience. I really hope that you will take a look at their collections. I've put in the chat if you want to take a look, Joanne Clarkson's email and Risa Denenberg's website if you want to get a signed copy from one of them. And that would be lovely. Until next time, I hope that we will see you again in another MoonPath Press book release reading. Hopefully there'll be one coming up in March, and I will let you guys know about that. Until that point, please be well, enjoy some poetry, be at peace, and be kind to yourself and one another. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lana. That's
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good to see you all.